Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz.
And I'm Brandis Friedman. On the show tonight,
this opportunity to be the poster child for equity in this industry belongs to Illinois.
Illinois is giving aspiring cannabis dispensary owners another shot after concerns the state missed its equity goals.
This president shall not choose the nominee to fill the vacancy, but the next president.
Will the Supreme Court nomination fight sway voters in the upcoming election?
Amid calls to defund the police and address systemic racism, we hear from 3 Black Chicago police officers.
Chicago needs to make space for everyone.
Why Chicago's affordable housing shortage is especially tough on Latino families.
Why aldermen are being advised not to end Chicago's contract with utility giant ComEd.
How extreme weather events are playing out across the country as autumn officially begins.
A Chicago entrepreneur and startup veteran takes over the leadership of Illinois Tech's Innovation Hub, and inclusion is her goal.
And Jeffrey Bayer raises the roof on Chicago's historic water tanks. But first, some of today's top stories. The Bulls have their next head coach. The team announced they've signed veteran college and NBA coach Billy Donovan to take the reins. Donovan most recently coached the Oklahoma City Thunder for 5 seasons, leading them to the playoffs for all 5 of those seasons and winning Co-Coach of the Year honors in 2019. Donovan also had a long career as head coach of the NCAA's Florida Gators, winning 2 national championships there. Donovan takes over for the fired Jim Boylan. Illinois' neighbor to the north is back on the city's travel ban list. Chicago Health Commissioner Dr. Allison Arwady explained why soaring COVID numbers in Wisconsin forced the city's decision.
They've had an increase of more than 130% in their cases of COVID, and their positivity rate is up to an average now of approximately 15%.
In addition to Wisconsin, health officials also add Idaho, Minnesota, Montana, and Puerto Rico to Chicago's travel order, which requests travelers from there and 14 other states to quarantine for 2 weeks upon their arrival. And Illinois health officials report 1,500 new cases of the coronavirus in the last 24 hours, with an additional 30 confirmed deaths. That puts the statewide total at more than 277,000 cases and nearly 8,500 deaths. The preliminary statewide testing positivity rate right now is 3.5%. And all of this news comes as the nation surpasses the grim milestone of 200,000 COVID-19 deaths. National Voter Registration Day comes with a plea from Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle.
Cook County is in need of election judges. I urge students, young adults, neighbors, and friends to volunteer as an election judge if you're able.
Preckwinkle made the comments at a Voter Registration Day event. The shortage of election judges comes amid concerns that in-person voting could put voters at risk for catching COVID. Cook County Clerk Karen Yarbrough says vote-by-mail ballots will start going out this Thursday, and early voting in Cook County begins October 9th. And now to Brandis and a cannabis reconsideration. Brandis.
Paris, thank you. Illinois' already delayed marijuana expansion is on pause, but many of the entrepreneurs trying to be part of the industry are hoping that good things will come to those who wait. Amanda Vinicky joins us now with the latest. Amanda.
Brandis, had things kept to schedule, Illinois by now would have double the number of marijuana dispensaries that it currently does, or at least been well on the road to that point. Instead, Illinois isn't even close.
What we're attempting to accomplish is hard to do and takes time to accomplish, but we have an obligation to ensure that it gets as a strong start and as strong a start as possible.
Instead of, as was planned, having a lottery this month to decide which finalists will win coveted state licenses to open 75 new pot shops, the governor says he's decided there will be a do-over, at least a partial one.
Over the last several weeks, we've listened to community leaders and legislators and heard the voices of unsuccessful applicants. And across the board, in a process that should be characterized by equity to its core, too many people have said that more needs to be done to ensure fairness. As governor, I'm not interested in protecting a process that people are afraid to trust.
And many of the failed applicants are distrustful of the process that led them to this point. Pritzker and Illinois law had promised to give priority to applicants directly impacted by the war on drugs. Social equity applicants and legislators who voted for the law say that is not what happened.
We had seen the results of the social equity grading of the recreational cannabis licenses, and we were extremely disappointed. It had not done what we had intended it to do.
The doctor has to have a continuing relationship. One of the big differences is the physician doesn't say, you know, you will take this dose.
And then when they do enter, your GM is the one that helps them with the different varieties.
Medicine and other forms of consumption are beyond resistance
Could I ask how much?
Okay, it looks like we're having a technical problem there with Amanda. Hopefully we'll be able to hear more about that. But now, back to Paris and the battle over the Supreme Court. Paris.
Thanks, Brandis. They have the votes. That's the message today from Senate Republicans who are vowing to move forward on hearings and a vote on whoever President Trump nominates to replace Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg to the Supreme Court. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell defended the contradiction between his move this year versus 2016 when he refused to hold hearings for President Obama's nominee Merrick Garland. And then Illinois Senator Dick Durbin shot back.
We have an obligation under the Constitution, should we choose to take advantage of it, with a president of the same party as the Senate to advance the nomination. And we will certainly do that this year.
Most of the people I represent in Illinois know the Supreme Court's important, but if you ask them why is it important to you personally, they'd be a little hard-pressed to come up with an answer. There is an easy answer today. Because we have 20 million Americans who are protected by the Affordable Care Act, we know that this protection is at risk in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court majority is at risk for the tactics of Mitch McConnell.
We'll get right to it. Thanks for joining us. Aziz Huq, from a legal perspective, is there anything problematic about moving forward in a truncated time period here while a presidential election is underway on a Supreme Court pick?
Yes, the Supreme Court pick is one of the most important questions that the Senate can deliberate on. And if it doesn't have enough time to do so carefully, the results can be damaging both to the court and the nation.
How much time would that be?
The historical practice has required more than the 46 or 7 days that we now have between us and the election.
Joe Morris, from a political perspective, is it the right move for Republicans to move forward on hearings and a possible vote before the November 3rd election?
Sure. I mean, it can be. These are all political questions. They're not legal questions. There's no legal timeline prescribed in the Constitution, just a sequence. There needs to be a nomination, a confirmation, and an appointment. How much time that takes is entirely up to the political actors, the president and the Senate. This is the moment when politics enters the judicial system. It's in the staffing of the judicial system. It should not enter at other times, but this is precisely the time when it should. And the American people should be judging the parties, the presidential candidates and the Senate candidates, and the parties as a whole. Are these the people we want to have filling these vacancies, or do we want the other guys filling the vacancies? Now is the time for the American people to be studying that carefully and preparing to make that decision.
And Joe, do you see a contradiction in what McConnell did in 2016, blocking hearings, saying the people should decide in the next election, versus going forward now?
Of course there's a contradiction, and it's a politically legitimate contradiction. There's a significant political difference under the Constitution, not a legal difference, a political difference between 2016 and now. In 2016, the president was of one party, the Senate majority was of another party. Today, the president and the Senate majority are of the same party. That makes a profound difference in terms of legitimate political calculations.
Certainly a political calculation, although it is not a historical precedent, as the Senate Majority Leader has said. Gerald Rosenberg, how does an appointment here in a quick fashion affect the presidential race?
That's a great question, and I think the honest answer is we do not know. But here are some factors I'd think about. Are there voters who are going to change their intended vote because of it? I'm doubtful. Are there voters, citizens who weren't going to vote, but who might vote because of it? Unlikely. What we do know is that Joe Biden has raised a remarkable amount of money since Justice Ginsburg's death that's suggesting her death and this controversy may be invigorating voters who were already going to vote for the Democrats.
Aziz Haq, what about that? Does raising a lot of money equate to more votes for one side or the other when it comes to the presidential race, but also the Senate races?
We don't know how fundraising total map onto voting patterns in this election, at least. Case shows that a majority of the American people, at least according to surveys conducted so far, have expressed their discomfort with the idea of an appointment moving forward before Inauguration Day.
And Joe Morris, what about the political prospects of some vulnerable Republican senators? You have Cory Gardner in Colorado, Susan Collins in Maine, Martha McSally in Arizona. Does a quick appointment, does it affect those races one way or the other?
I agree with Professor Rosenberg. We don't know. It can slice one way or the other. There will be voters who are happy. There will be voters who are unhappy. There's nothing inherently odd, unusual, or wrong with a speedy confirmation process. Justice Ginsburg herself was confirmed 42 days of nomination proceeding. A confirmation process in which I personally took place years ago as a low-level runner of the copy machine was that of Justice Stevens, whose nomination process took 19 days. There are 42 days between now and the election. That's a political judgment that Mr. Trump, Senator McConnell, and the voters are entitled to make.
Gerald Rosenberg, Democrats seem to be debating internally about how to approach a response to this, whether they threaten things like court packing if they take control, or abolishing the Electoral College, the filibuster, versus, just focusing on the issues, the economy, health care. What's the best road forward for Democrats?
Look, we know, and people like us and maybe your audience sometimes forget this, that most people don't spend time thinking about the Supreme Court. Pew did a major survey in July and August, and they asked people what reasons they gave for supporting either President Trump or Joe Biden. Nobody mentioned the court. And interestingly, in 2016, 4% of Trump voters and 3% of Clinton voters did mention the court. So I think this will be an issue that won't weigh very heavily on most voters. However, if the Democrats win the presidency and the Senate, they have a number of tools in which they can pressure the court to vote in ways they want or not stop them. I think this would act, a nomination and an appointment by the president would be very bad for the court's legitimacy moving forward.
Aziz Haq is someone who served under Justice Ginsburg in the Supreme Court. What do you make of the threats to expand the court if this motion goes through?
I think if the nomination goes through this year before the inauguration, the striking contrast between what was done in 2016 to 17 and today will leave an enduring impression with many Americans that the court is a partisan institution. It will be perceived as a partisan institution, and its rulings will be treated as such by many, many people.
Joe Morris, just a few seconds left. What about that? Do you think that American citizens might start to question the Supreme Court and its nonpartisan nature?
The horse is already out of that barn. It's an unfortunate fact for the last generation or more, precisely because of the way in which Supreme Court nomination controversies have been handled. The American people increasingly see the court as a political agency, a third or super branch of the legislature, if you will. That's a terrible thing. And the politics that surrounds the court is something that needs to be pruned back seriously. The American people are right in being cautious about it.
All right. Well, these are discussions we want to keep having with all three of you. And my thanks right now to Joseph Morris, Aziz Haq, and Gerald Rosenberg. And now, Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, we're checking back in with Amanda Vinicky now. Amanda, we lost your connection earlier in the program. You were telling us about why many are distrustful of the process for marijuana licenses set up earlier in the year.
Yeah, Brandis, as we're talking about a redo for cannabis dispensary applicants, seems fitting, I guess, that we would have to have a redo of this story. And as you heard, the governor said that he wanted to be sure that folks weren't distrustful of that process, but many of the applicants are. The law and the governor had promised that priority would be given to applicants who were from communities who had been most affected by the war on drugs. And instead, social equity applicants, as well as legislators who voted for the law, say that that's not what happened.
We had seen the results of the social equity grading of the recreational cannabis licenses, and we were extremely disappointed. It had not done what we had intended it to do.
The original results left only 21 finalists for those 75 dispensary licenses, meaning that many of those applicants are set to win multiple of these very lucrative licenses from the state, even as hundreds of others were missing out on the shot completely. Applicants say that the state has been secretive about its scoring rubric. They also say that KPMG, which got a no-bid contract to score these applications, did not treat all applicants equally, one critic even calling the company KKK PMG. Now, the company has denied that allegation, says they followed the state's guidelines. Now, they say that if some of these finalists, these applicants who did not win licenses, don't qualify, they say that those who won used fronts to win social equity points. And after all of that criticism, governor says he heard it. The state is now going to give these failed applicants who scored at least above a base level a second chance. They're going to have the opportunity to correct so-called deficiencies on their applications.
I want to thank the governor for taking the time to actually look through everything and giving us a chance, not only me, but everyone who had a chance to apply.
Pausing the lottery and properly allowing applicants to cure their deficiencies is just a start in the right direction.
Felicia Royster, who is trying to win one of these licenses in the second round, says regardless of how things pan out, Illinois should make some changes, like simultaneously awarding more dispensary licenses to social equity applicants. Also, she says she wants Illinois to create an advisory committee of Black and brown stakeholders, and she says the state should be more transparent about scoring.
Trust is the reward for transparency. In the state's effort to ensure that this process is actually as equitable as it was advertised, in order for the state to renew public trust and create a less biased playing field, we would like to request the state release the rubric.
Now, this semi-do-over could free the state from some lawsuits over the process from some of those failed social equity applicants. But then again, it could also start a new round of litigation from the finalists that had made it to the lottery the first time and now fear that they could be losing their chance at winning a license. The governor says, by the way, that he aims to have this new round of redone scoring completed by this fall. But again, KPMG had won a contract and was paid, in fact, millions by the state to do it the first time around. And as we've reported, KPMG had extra months to do that before getting that completed. So we'll see on the timeline. Brandis, back to you.
Extra long process, Amanda. Thank you. In 2007, Chicago passed an updated Affordable Requirements Ordinance to address an affordable housing shortage using money obtained from developers building market rate units. But in the past 13 years, just slightly over 1,000 units for households with low or moderate incomes have been built. And for Latino families whose average median income is lower than that of Chicago's overall area median income, even those units still might not be affordable. This week, a 20-member task force released recommendations they believe will help Chicago increase the affordable housing stock. WTTW News Director and host Ugo Balta recently brought us this story on Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. Here's another look.
The North Side's Albany Park is one of the city's most diverse neighborhoods in both the ethnicity of its residents and its housing stock. But when the 2008 foreclosure crisis hit, some of what makes the neighborhood so lively and vibrant faded away.
When we saw cash investors coming in and buying our 2 to 4 flat buildings and deconverting them into single-family homes, we lost a lot of affordable housing in our 2 to 4 unit buildings. And Albany Park is really made up of many Latinx families that have lived in the neighborhood a long time. And because of the deconversions that were happening, a lot of my neighbors left.
By then, the city was already running short on affordable housing, and the problem was getting worse. But rather than trying to get new units built in Albany Park, community activists like Diane Lemus fought to preserve the affordability of existing rental apartments.
Well, I think our 2 to 4 flats are very unique because they have 3 bedrooms. They're family units, right? And the rents are lower than the other huge apartment buildings. They call it natural occurring affordable housing.
That fight continues to this day. Earlier this month, the Inclusionary Housing Task Force released a report with several recommendations for updating the Affordability Requirements Ordinance. The ARO aims to address the shortfall of over 100,000 units of affordable housing. The task force report cited particular fears of losing Latino residents due to rising rents in gentrifying communities like Logan Square, Pilsen, and Hermosa. One of the task force recommendations is increasing production of affordable family-sized units. In Chicago, the average Latino family has 3.7 members, but fewer than 5% of the roughly 1,000 affordable housing units created in the last 13 years included 3 bedrooms.
The developers say that that type of unit doesn't sell. It doesn't sell if you're charging market rate. But I guarantee you put a 2 to 3 flat unit here in Albany Park and keep it below 60% of the AMI, it will be one of the first apartments to go. Because those are family units, our Latinx are families.
Bickerdike Redevelopment Corporation CEO Joy Arguete was a member of the task force. She says as circumstances change over the years, the methods the city employs to increase and maintain affordable housing in Chicago have to evolve.
The market that oftentimes stimulates higher priced housing is not going to provide mechanisms for people to remain in a community. So if we really value, mixed income, healthy communities, then we have to make sure that we have the mechanism for that to thrive. And I think the ARO is one of many important tools to help that happen. Chicago needs to make space for everyone. We rely on workers in all of our communities to teach our children, to make our food, to work in our religious and civic institutions, and they aren't people who earn a lot of money.
But the housing shortfall isn't the only shortfall Chicago faces this year. A $1.2 billion gap in the city's budget means that the solutions have to, at least in part, finance themselves.
The idea largely behind the Affordable Requirements Ordinance has been that it's a program that not only supports its own activities, but generates revenue to support activities that have the same objective, right? The creation of affordable housing.
Back in Albany Park, Diane Lemus worries about not only the present housing shortage, but even worse shortages to come as the pandemic continues to wreak financial havoc.
These are the people that are working 3 jobs, knowing that COVID is out there and still going to work every day. Those are the people that need the help, and we should help them.
That again was WTTW News Director and host of Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, Hugo Balta. Chicago's Housing Commissioner Marissa Navarra says the Inclusionary Housing Task Force's recommendations will be used as a framework for a revised law. And be sure to tune in Saturday evenings at 6 for more Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. And now to Phil Ponce and more on the first day of fall. Phil.
Brandon, today marks the fall equinox, the official first day of fall when the sun sits directly over the equator and day and night are just about equal. But as Chicago gets ready for brisker weather, the rest of the country is still being racked by wildfires, hurricanes, and the aftermath of last month's destructive derecho in the Midwest. Joining us with the latest updates on all of this is Scott Collis. He is an atmospheric scientist at Argonne National Laboratory. Welcome back to Chicago Tonight, Scott. And first, let's start with the catastrophic wildfires on the West Coast. Are they showing any signs of slowing down?
Thanks, Phil. It's unfortunate but true that one benefit of having an area that has been burnt is that it takes a couple of years before it can be burnt again. But most concerning is these fires are occurring at a time of year before the Santa Ana winds kick in, which tend to make these fires more extreme.
So you say the Santa Ana winds, that's been an historic factor, but can you briefly tell us how these events are linked to a warming climate?
Yes, the warmer the air gets in a warming climate, the more moisture it can contain. So when these hot winds blow across the forests in California and in Oregon and Washington State, they dry out the floor of the forest and make it tinder and ready to go. Furthermore, with a warmer climate, we're actually seeing less snowpack in the alpine mountain ranges, which actually means less moisture, less water to recharge the soil.
You alluded to some of the tinder on the forest floor. As you probably know, the president says that clearing debris in forests could actually be helpful. Is there more at play here, though?
So forest management is part of the equation, control burns and so forth. However, there is vast areas of forest ready to be burnt. So there needs to be an all of the above type approach. But the warm weather we're having and climate change definitely plays a role.
Larger role than simply one step in as part of the equation. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're saying?
We definitely know that in a warming climate, there will be more and more extreme fires. Furthermore, the fire season will actually run for longer.
Well, for the past few weeks, we have seen smoky skies in Chicago. How exactly does the smoke make it to the Chicago area all the way from the West Coast like that?
So these very hot fires, they can put smoke very high up into the atmosphere, anywhere between 30,000 to 40,000 feet. And there is a current in the air that circles the globe called the jet stream. It generally runs from west to east. So these fires have put smoke that have been caught up in this stream of air, pulling it over our region and giving us the quite vibrant sunrises and sunsets we've been seeing.
Scott, does this smoke have any potential impact on the weather here in Chicago?
So at the moment, our air quality is considered moderate, which is kind of normal for this time of year. And that's because the smoke is mainly sitting very high in the atmosphere above us. Not much of it is actually getting down to the surface. However, because it cuts out some of the sunlight, it can actually have a slight cooling effect on our daytime temperatures.
You have been studying the derecho that hit the Midwest and Chicago last month. Real quickly, remind us what a derecho is.
So the word derecho is derived from the Spanish word for straight. It's a storm that just looks like a great big wall of cloud. It's a very Midwestern phenomena, and it's a special type of thunderstorm that we call an organized thunderstorm that occurs when all the right ingredients are in place to make these very intense wind-producing, hail-producing, and torrential rain-producing storms.
Because they seem more widespread and at least more massive, say, than a tornado is. Elaborate on that, please.
Yes, the derecho can carry wind speeds like this one did in Iowa of well over 100 kilometers an hour as it gets moving and starts pulling down those very strong very strong winds in the upper atmosphere. It can actually produce wind swaths of hundreds of miles wide. So as this system went through the western border of Iowa, they actually saw wind speeds in excess of 120 miles per hour over a very wide range.
Scott, at the same time, we're seeing a very active hurricane season. Give us some insights into why that is.
So just like a derecho needs the right ingredients to get going, so does a hurricane. A hurricane needs really warm water. That's what it feeds on, is that energy in the Atlantic and other oceans. It also needs just the right wind patterns, both at the surface and in the upper atmosphere to vent out all of those clouds that are going up. So this season, just the right combination of ingredients has come together to produce this incredibly active season.
So today is the first official day of fall. Can you give us any insights or predictions as to what the weather might hold over the next coming months going into winter?
So the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration has recently declared a La Nina. A La Nina is a kind of global weather phenomena that influences all the other weather systems. It tends to set up very stable air just off the west coast that pushes weather systems coming in off the Pacific up into Alaska and back down over to us. So during a La Nina year, Chicago tends to see fairly seasonable temperatures, but will tend to be wetter than a normal year and much wetter than a El Nino year. So climate is what you expect and weather is what you get. There'll still be a lot of variability around, but on average, we expect things to be wetter than normal.
And real quickly, wetter than normal, does that mean a rainy winter or does that mean snow?
Well, Chicago, if you don't like the weather, wait a day. So Chicago sits in a really interesting region where we can get anything from an ice storm to a snowfall in a given couple of days. And because we're in a La Nina, there is no strong driver for colder temperatures. So it really could be either, depending on the kind of season that we get.
Scott Collis, thank you so much. Appreciate your insights and your prediction.
Thank you, Phil.
And you can learn more about the fall equinox, including the famous Chicago henge phenomenon, on our website, WTTW.com/news. And now, Paris, we go back to you.
Thanks, Phil. And still to come on Chicago tonight, 3 black police officers shared their perspectives on policing amid the racial justice movement. It'll cost Chicago billions of dollars to end its contract with ComEd, but that's not stopping some aldermen from wanting to create a municipal electric utility. Illinois Tech's Innovation Hub gets a new leader, a startup veteran committed to making entrepreneurship open to all. And how Chicago's historic water tanks are holding up in tonight's Ask Jeffrey. First, we go back to Brandis and what it's like to be a black police officer amid racial turmoil. Brandis.
Paris, in the aftermath of George Floyd's death and other police killings of black Americans, calls to defund and reform the police have intensified. This as Chicago grapples with the coronavirus, a drastic increase in shootings, and amid contract negotiations between the city and police union. Joining us to discuss policing as black officers amid a racial justice movement are Officer Malcolm Brooks, Officer Rashida Young, and Sergeant Jermaine Harris. Welcome to Chicago Tonight. Thanks to all of you for joining us. So, Sergeant Harris, let's start with you, please. Obviously, recent months have been filled with heightened community police tensions in response to police killings of black Americans. How do you navigate your own identity as a black police officer at a time like this?
I think the big thing about it, Brandis, is that there's really no separation. Like, I don't get to take off being a black man and becoming a police, and those things are interchangeable. So those roles are really one. And so as I do them, it's really with that integrity of understanding my community and bringing in those benefits of being able to relate and connect to the people we serve. I think that's a great benefit with being an African-American police officer.
And Officer Brooks, you joined the police department 3 years ago because you wanted to see change. You wanted to be the change that you want to see. Do you feel like you're having an impact, and what is the change you'd like to see?
Well, yeah, I do believe I'm having an impact. Working in community policing has been a great experience. We're able to go out and just really meet a lot of residents and have great relationships with them, and just really just do the type of policing that I came on the job to do. And so, yes, I believe that going forward, as far as the change that I want to see more of a combined, unified effort with the community and the police, because we can't do this job without the community. So for me, change would be the community working together with the police and the police working better with the community.
I imagine that's difficult in a time like this. Do you feel like you're seeing that happen?
Absolutely. I've been a part of community policing for about a year now, and I've made a lot of great relationships with people in the community. I've made a lot of great relationships with the faith-based community, business owners, a lot of community ambassadors and leaders and things of that nature. So, yeah, I think that we're making strides in the right direction. I think that a lot more needs to be done, but we're making good groundwork, and we're starting to make a lot of collaborative efforts, especially on the west side of Chicago. That's the side of Chicago that I work on. So I think that a lot of great things are happening, and I look forward to a lot of great things happening in the future.
And Officer Young, obviously in the aftermath of George Floyd's death and recent police shootings, you told our producer that you feel a greater sense of responsibility as a Black officer. What is that responsibility?
And so my responsibility now is to intervene more. Not to say that I wasn't intervening in the beginning, but I'm helping out a lot more, because if you're not born and raised in the city of Chicago, what tends to happen is you don't understand the people that live here. And being an officer, you know, I'm stepping up to the plate more to help out with the community, you know, as opposed to like the community versus the residents or the citizens in Chicago. I'm intervening more because a lot of times the residents aren't understood by officers that aren't from Chicago.
And how would you say the job of policing has changed for you in recent years?
Well, policing is changed dramatically with the deaths and things like that have occurred. It's just one of those things as to where what we need to do is we need to learn how to de-escalate more. You know, we can't just come to the scene or respond to a job and, you know, it's you do as I say. And, you know, I mean, people need to be heard, and I'm here to hear them out.
Sergeant Harris, we've heard a lot of talk about defunding the police department, and it's getting a lot more air in recent months. What are your thoughts on that argument?
So the idea of, you know, saying the word defund police, it's a polarizing, you know, statement to make. And I think the trouble with that is that we're getting lost in the wording and not really understanding what it means. So if you really dissect the understanding of what the calls are asking for, it's really is, let's use our funding, let's use our resources more effective to benefit people. And as officers, as a Black officer, with all of us, you know, the three of us, we all agree that resources need to be spent properly. So if we can get past the idea of turning this into a political topic and really get to serving our communities and what's really needed there, that's something I can get behind. And I'm all behind getting those resources where they need to be.
As police officers, you know, we hear a lot of people say that we are asking our officers, our police officers, to do more than they are trained to do. Sergeant Harris, what's your reaction to that?
So defunding really is how we got into this mess in the first place. Our social services, our mental health, you know, all these resources that existed have been defunded in the past. And over these decades and years that this investment has been occurring, it's been now placing that burden upon police officers to fill that gap. Our officers are now getting training for dealing with mental health issues. Mental health isn't a crime, right? They're being trained to deal with youth issues. We're being trained all of these things to fill these voids and these gaps when we could really use a lot more help with getting people that are professionals and experts in those areas to be able to step up and get into the game.
So obviously, you know, the push for reform, it comes as the city is negotiating a new contract with the police union, the Fraternal Order of Police. Officer Brooks, do you feel well represented by the FOP?
Yeah, I do. But I can only speak from my point of view and my perceptions of how I view things. I've actually met the union president, and our interactions were pretty positive. And so, yeah, I do feel like I'm represented, but my interactions with him or my interactions with FOP may not be the interactions that other people may have. So I can't speak to other people's perceptions and their interactions, but I can only speak to mine. So far, so good.
Obviously, as officers retire, the number of black cops is likely to decrease, according to an annual report from the city's Deputy Inspector General for Public Safety. Officer Young, how important is it to have more black officers on the beat?
Well, the community is saying they would like to see people that look like them. That's what we hear a lot of times. We've had several community conversations, and they want people to be able to understand them.
So obviously you feel that it is important for more officers like the three of you to be doing the job.
I'm not going to say that we can get more officers like the three of us to do the job, because it is hard, but it would help out.
Okay. My thanks to Sergeant Jermaine Harris, Officer Rashida Young, and Officer Malcolm Brooks. Thanks to all of you for joining us on Chicago Tonight.
Thank you.
A recent study says it cost Chicago $9 billion to cut ties with utility giant ComEd. Aldermen met today to discuss the study and its recommendations. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon is here with more on why that study didn't sit too well with some members of the City Council. So Heather, on electricity for vulnerable customers, did that decision come under pressure from the mayor?
It absolutely did. So yesterday, Mayor Lightfoot sent ComEd a letter that basically laid out what she wants to see in a new agreement with ComEd. And right up top in bold underlined text was a demand that they not shut off anyone's electricity during this pandemic and economic recession. ComEd told me this afternoon that they had agreed to do that through the winter, but warned that everybody might eventually have to pay more to make up the difference.
And tell us a little bit more about why the committee met today to discuss that study and what came of the meeting.
Well, the study basically says that it would be far too expensive for the city to try to create its own municipal utility, basically cut ties with ComEd. And this was really an opportunity for the aldermen who favor a municipal utility to make one last push to convince their colleagues that it made sense to continue down this path. They did not get very far because most aldermen see that $9 billion price tag, their eyes pop out of their head, and the conversation stops right there.
Yeah, $9 billion is a hefty number. Okay, thanks to Heather Sharon for joining us. And you can read Heather's full story on our website, where you can find the full report as well. It's all at WTTW.com/news. And now we go to Paris and a new leader for Illinois Tech's Innovation Hub. Paris.
Can Chicago become a tech hub that matches the activity on the coast? Over the past decade, city, state, and business leaders have worked to grow Chicago's profile as a go-to destination for tech entrepreneurs. Illinois Institute of Technology has joined in to help grow the next generation of the city's tech industry, and the school has just named a new leader for the Ed Kaplan Family Institute for Innovation and Tech Entrepreneurship. And joining us now to tell us about her new role leading the Kaplan Institute is Miriam Saleh, an entrepreneur and Chicago-based computational neuroscientist. Miriam Saleh, thank you so much for being here.
Happy to be here.
All right,
Hi.
so you recently worked as part of a startup company that was developing brain implants to help paralyzed folks regain movement. Tell us about your entrepreneurial background.
Absolutely. So that was actually my first startup. So while people like Elon Musk are building brain implants today through the company Neuralink, my company launched about 20 years ago out of research that was spun out of Brown. And we built a brain implant that had been used in monkeys and kind of animal research for years and years to understand how the brain codes for movement. So we used that implant and brought it into the clinic to restore movement in paralyzed people through a company called Cyberkinetics Neurotechnology Systems.
It certainly has amazing ramifications for health, and as you mentioned, Elon Musk and others have jumped on that technology. So why did you want to leave the private sector to come take this role at IIT?
Well, if you look at my background, I'm very passionate about taking ideas to market. And I've always worked at the intersection of academia and the startup world. So for example, I was part of the launch team at Matter, a business development hub for healthcare startups, where we really help them connect with enterprise companies who are customers of their solutions. I'm very passionate about supporting the innovation ecosystem in Chicago. and have really, this idea of working with, entrepreneurs and innovators who have napkin sketches and helping them figure out how to get to that idea on the market is something I'm really passionate about and have direct experience with, as well as experience in more of a supportive role. So I really love doing that. I think I love helping people. So this is the perfect role for me.
Right, and this role's at IIT, the head of the Kaplan Institute, only a couple miles from where you got your PhD at the University of Chicago. Remind us the mission of the Kaplan Institute.
Absolutely. If I had to say it in one sentence, it would be to fuel entrepreneurship with diversity. Our student body represents a very diverse community. We have a good number of international students and representatives from all different types of communities in and outside of Chicago. And really our goal here is to make entrepreneurship accessible to everyone. Everyone can benefit from an entrepreneurial mindset. And we do it through cross-disciplinary programs that really bring disciplines from all the colleges at IIT together in a team-based setting to develop ideas. And then we work with industry partners so that the students can immerse themselves in the environments where their solutions will be used and co-develop solutions with the community.
And, one of the rubs in Chicago we hear is that there's no lack of talent or lack of ideas. It's just a lack of access to venture capital here, that you probably see more of in Silicon Valley. Is that getting any better here in Chicago and in the Midwest?
I believe it is, and I do have a stat for you. So, just in 2018, startups essentially had brought in more than $1.9 billion in venture capital funding. So I wouldn't say there's a significant lack of funding here, but we do have several mechanisms in place to support the entrepreneurs who are ready to raise capital. We work very closely with the VC firms in town and those out of the city to support the entrepreneurs when they're ready to have those conversations.
All right, you talked about diversity in entrepreneurship. You're also the co-founder of an effort called Chicago Women in Bio 3.8. Talk about the historic underrepresentation of women in tech and whether that's getting better or not.
Absolutely. So there aren't, unfortunately, it's not equitable today, and from a gender standpoint, as well as other standpoints, and really from I don't think that's a mystery. If you look around at not just at the leadership level, but in startups. There really isn't enough representation of women. And so there are a lot of questions as to why. The types of reasons that we've been able to collect are that the workplace conditions aren't perfect for women. Women typically feel like there's a sense of being stalled in their careers. And so those are some of the reasons why they leave their positions, but also there are very few leadership positions accessible to them. And so they're somehow unable to really kind of grow in their careers. And so the 3.8 initiative's goal is really to change that by supporting women, influential female executives in taking board seats on startups. And while we can't, force a marriage, we create a program where we select women leaders who we think are ready for those board seats, and create opportunities for them to learn about the startup community, learn about the needs, understand how their skill sets are relevant to those companies, and really introduce them to the community so they have a chance to advise and be at the leadership level. And we believe that will be the starting point for creating a more diverse environment. So bring more women at the board level, and we'll start seeing change across the organization.
All right, certainly an important mission there. And Miriam Saleh, thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations on the position at IIT.
Thank you.
Up next, a special encore edition of Ask Jeffrey.
Coverage of science and technology on Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Joel M. Friedman, president of the Alvin H. Baum Family Fund.
They're rare now, but rooftop water tanks once stood sentinel atop every large building in the city, keeping them safe from the threat of fire. Jeffrey Bayer is here to say thanks for those tanks in tonight's edition of Ask Jeffrey, or Tanks for Those Tanks. Hey, Jeffrey, how's it going?
Great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, and tonight's letter comes from Brian Bacon in the West Loop. He asks, on top of the buildings around Chicago's neighborhoods, I frequently see water tanks or water tank platforms where the water tank has been removed. What are they for, and are they still in use?
Well, longtime viewers might remember we actually answered a question similar to this one 8 years ago, but we thought this is actually a really good time to do an update. Back then, 8 years ago, I described the tanks as a vanishing vestige of another era in Chicago. And sadly, they're continuing to disappear from the skyline. Their purpose was to provide an easily accessible water supply to put out fires.
Okay, so I think I know where this is going. We're talking about old buildings, putting out fires, 1871.
Ding, 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 you got it right. After the Great Fire of 1871, ordinances were passed requiring these tanks on top of warehouses, factories, and public buildings. In this 1943 vintage film we're looking at, you can see a few of the hundreds that were installed across the city. Water and rooftop tanks, it's a simple matter of being gravity fed, so it's fed down to the firefighters as almost a fail-safe supply for emergencies. The law spawned a whole industry in water tank construction and maintenance. Many firms were actually owned by German and Swedish immigrants because they were experts in high-quality wooden barrel making. And these tanks were built to stand the test of time. Redwood tanks could last 50 years, and cypress ones could last for a century.
And so how much water could each of these tanks hold?
A lot. The average water tank is 16 feet by 16 feet, so it holds about 20,000 gallons of water. And they can even get a lot bigger. This one near Goose Island holds about 3 times that much. Today, buildings have electric pumps on site to supply fire suppression systems, so the water tanks basically become obsolete.
So we're looking at this one here. I can recall a few that I've seen across the city. How many in total are left today?
Well, the organization Preservation Chicago estimates about 125 tanks remain in the city, and about 90 of them actually are still in use. That is down from 140 remaining tanks when we did this story in 2012, so a loss of 15. At one point, there were at least 1,300 of them, and according to some sources, thousands in Chicago. Preservation Chicago and others have been sounding the alarm about the dwindling number of tanks in Chicago over the last 20 years or so. In 2006, Mayor Richard M. Daley's administration designated the tanks as historic structures and required building owners to explore options for preserving or reusing the tanks before demolishing them. Now, the city has long required regular inspections of the tanks to ensure that they're in good repair. But a big disaster in 2013 resulted in even stricter water tank laws. The historic water tank on the roof of the landmark Brewster building in Lincoln Park toppled over and fell 8 stories to the ground, injuring 3 people, at least one of whom was knocked off her feet by tens of thousands of gallons of gushing water. And you can imagine, people could have been killed. Across the city, the cost of upkeep on water tanks has unfortunately led some building owners to just demolish them instead of maintaining them.
So we've been looking at some of the water tanks that still exist across the city. Any that viewers would particularly recognize?
Well, one of my favorites, in 2014, a 1927 water tank that was painted to resemble the Swedish flag in the Northside Andersonville neighborhood had to be torn down after it was damaged beyond repair during a brutal winter. But the tank was such an icon in the neighborhood that it was replaced with a fiberglass and steel replica, no water inside, in 2017. And another flag emblazoned tank viewers might know is this one, painted with the Chicago flag at Ashland and the Kennedy Expressway.
Yeah, I recognize both of these. So you mentioned being reused. How are they being reused?
Well, a modern example of reuse of a water tank is at Skinner Elementary School in the West Loop neighborhood. This is by the architecture firm of SMNGA. a historic water tank was restored, and it's used as a stormwater cistern to irrigate the school's green roof. And even the platforms can be reused if the tanks are gone. Now, instead of holding water, this tank platform in the Lincoln Square neighborhood holds cell phone antennas. But the ultimate reuse story actually concerns a metal water tank, not a wooden one, that used to stand at Adams and LaSalle and survived the Chicago fire. It was originally built for the municipal water system, not for fire suppression. It was converted to Chicago's first public library to house the 8,000 books sent as a gift from the people of England, including one from Queen Victoria herself, to start a free library as Chicago recovered from the disaster.
That certainly is an incredible reuse, and the cell phone tower, not quite as visually or aesthetically pleasing as the original water tank. All right, Jeffrey, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Or thank you. And don't forget that you can visit our website for more details about water tanks and other Ask Jeffrey stories. And while you're there, don't forget to submit your own question to Jeffrey Bayer. That's at WTTW.com/news. And there's more Chicago Tonight right after this.
And that's our show for this Tuesday night.
And that was a rerun, just so you thought I was changing
You
suits
changed
that
in the
quickly,
middle
Brandis.
of the show. Everybody knows
I,
this.
I know, okay. Fine, the jig is up. All right, please join us tomorrow night live at 7. Senator Dick Durbin on the fight over Justice Ginsburg's replacement on the Supreme Court.
And the push for Chicago's census participation with a deadline a week away. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm named by elite lawyers as the top aviation firm in the country in 2020.